What it is, Brad Lee back again with another episode of Dropping Bombs today in the studio. Folks, as always, I got a real special treat for you. Luke Lunkenheimer's in the house. What's up, Luke?
What's up, brother? Very glad to be here.
Folks, you can follow him at Luke Lunk, just like it sounds, L-U-N-K, owner of CNY Drives, and now a very aggressively growing sales trainer.
That's what they say.
Now, CNY Drives, what is it? That's the automotive businesses?
Those are three humble used car establishments that were the springboard of my selling career as of late, my post-nonsense period. And investor threw some money up and we made a project out of it, scaled to 3 stores and did pretty well.
And now you're also expanding into teaching people how to close, sell, and persuade with Paid to Persuade.
Kind of a catchy name, isn't it?
Paid to the number 2 Persuade. Paid to Persuade.
Yeah, I discovered that my talents weren't in being a car dealer. Turning inventory wasn't exactly my area of expertise, and marketing and all those fun things that are actually a part of operating the business. Come to find out, I'm somewhat par at those, but what I excelled at, I later found out, was training my salespeople. They're all ruthless killers.
Why do you have some special frameworks or processes that seem to work better nowadays?
Well, it would be funny that you ask, sir. Yeah, man, listen, traditional selling is display a product, build rapport, meet somebody, and show them a product, display the product, be the walk-around king of the dealership, make the car look all pretty, and then send them on a test drive, warm them up, ask them about their kids, and try to get it closed. And then from there, it's trip and fall and stumble and overcome objections and hope that eventually you get to the dynamite and make a sale. What we've discovered is a compassionate interrogation process at the outset. We have something that we call the big 3, which is what brought you here today, what is your buying power, and what did you hope to accomplish? You say that to a veteran salesperson and they're immediately like, yeah, dude, that's what I ask every customer. But it's not asking the question. It's continuing upon the question until you have the answer that you know you need, which later on in the sale routes you to the close without an objection. So we flush everything out at the outset. It's incredibly effective.
So before we get into the business end of things, I know that you have a past.
I do.
And apparently you was a bank robber.
I was.
And
I am technically always going to be.
No, you were.
I was.
You're not a bank robber anymore.
I'm not actively holding a bank, sir. No, but I think once a bank robber, always a bank robber.
Well, I would disagree. Only because, dude, you have to rob banks to be a bank robber.
Understood.
You might have been you were a bank robber.
Yes.
You aren't a bank robber.
If someone asks me if I'm a functional bank robber, the answer is, of course, no. But I've heard you speak on addiction and things like that. And, I had experienced severe issues with addiction. And I think any addict, I heard you with Novak the other day, that carries through the lifespan because it's kind of like cancer, right? If you know it's there and you don't pay any mind to it and you don't maintain it, it's going to rear its head and it's going to take you, right? Yeah. So I pay homage to the fact that I once held up banks, but I certainly don't act upon it. And it's something that's I guess when you're at my point in life, when you've retired that entire mindset, that south-pointing moral compass and everything that came with it, you have no problem joking about it.
So you were a legitimate bona fide bank robber.
As it would be, yes. I walked into a bank. I told them to give me money. I took said money and I egressed the establishment with the currency, sir. So I am a bona fide bank robber.
Now, did you go to prison for that?
I did.
How long did you get?
I was sentenced to a 1 to 3, which is an indeterminate sentence. So in New York State, they love to set you up for failure. So they send you in guaranteeing that you're going to do at least 12 months. And then good behavior, I think, is like 10 or something like that. But ultimately, the way they set it up is that, they hold that other additional time over your head. So if you misbehave, if you pop off, as they call it, and engage in violence, or you give a guard a hard time or throw your urine, which they do stuff like that, they'll definitely make you do the whole 3.
But that ain't bad for robbing a bank.
No.
You would think bank robbers should get way longer.
They should. And originally I was looking at 7 to 14, but it just so happens that the powers of persuasion are effective in all areas of life.
What'd you do? Talk your way out of it?
If I'd have talked my way out of it, I wouldn't be a retired felon. But no, I talked my way from a 7 to 14 down to a 1 to 3. And in fact, almost had the district attorney convinced to give me what would be called a 6-5 split, which is 6 months in jail, 5 years post-release. But essentially the head district attorney in that county would not allow a bank robbery conviction to go away not being a felony and not serving state time. So I copped to the 1 to 3, which was the least they were going to give me, and kept it moving.
So it was only one bank then?
One bank, yes, sir.
Okay. So when you walked in, it wasn't guns blazing and movie style. You told me the story earlier, and I wanted it to be shared because you kind of sold them. You were very polite. You were a polite bank robber.
I would say so. As polite as walking into an establishment and robbing them for $10,000 could be on a Monday afternoon.
Why only 10 grand?
Because it was because that's what the 2 tellers that I knocked over had. There's somebody feel free to
he says knocked over
to comment and correct me otherwise. But at the time, I'd done some quick reading before I decided to partake in that act, and discovered that if you rob 3 bank tellers, it becomes a federal crime because the FDIC insurance kicks in or something like that. Again, this was all just hearsay that I read online, but I wasn't willing to take the chance, so I kept it to 2 tellers, and between the 2 of them, they had $9,822.
Wow, interesting.
I didn't think I was going to get that much, to be honest with you. I thought I was going to get like $1,200 and some quarters.
What were you needing or wanting the money for?
Opiates, brother. I was a terrible opiate addict.
So you needed drugs.
Yeah. Most people ask me, man, did you go in and rob that bank because you were so high, dude? You probably don't even remember it, do you? And I tell them, no, I remember it as vivid as it was yesterday. I can tell you what the room smelled like. I can tell you what the red velvet rope felt like gracing my forearm as I walked up to the tellers. I can tell you that the lump that I had in my throat at that time, I could barely speak and get the words out because the adrenaline was just so overpowering, and somehow managed to pull it off. But I was stone sober at that time.
But you didn't have a gun?
No, sir.
So how did you know they would give you the money?
Because I know that the bank policy for that particular credit union, because I did my research, was no violence, no threat of violence, and they didn't have armed security. So if somebody comes in there and asks you for the currency, you give it up and you let them walk out, and you minimize the damages.
Well, that might be a good policy, but I wouldn't agree with it.
I don't imagine you would.
No, unless there's a gun or some sort of force, I would say tell them to fuck off.
Well, I think at the time that would have been very effective because I was a sickly, skinny, sucked out opiate addict. I didn't stand 6'4", 280 pounds at the time. So if they had pushed back and said, go take a shit, I would have been like, no, give me the money. And they would have said, no. And I would have said, shit, and ran out the back door.
That's
just keeping it real.
Yeah, because if they don't have a gun, what can they do? But, supposedly they could pull one. You don't know did you act like you had one?
No, I actually said the opposite. I believe exactly what I said was, good afternoon, ladies. I think it's pretty obvious based on my attire what's transpiring right now. You're all going to go home. I'm not here to hurt anybody, and I don't want anything that's not insured by the federal government. I'm going to rob 2 of you, so please start taking out the bills. I don't want any tracers or die packs, nothing marked. Fan out the bills on the counter, and I'll be out of your hair in no time. And then they kind of sat befuddled and looked, and there was a weird silence in the air, and then I said, move! Then they started moving. Just like that, Bradley.
That's crazy, dude. Did you read that you could only get a couple of years?
No, honestly, Brad, what was going on, if we're going to keep it a buck, because you're the real Bradley and I want to be real with you, that is, at that time, I was so empty. There was no meaning to life for me at that time. I had no good connection, no meaningful connection with my immediate family. We're not going to go down the woe is me trail, but there was certainly no effective communication with my immediate family. They're not we didn't have the best upbringing. The people that were involved in my life were all shit, druggies, and just scum. The woman I was with at the time, I later found out she was madly in love with me, but at the time I thought she was going to leave me because of all the drug usage and all the nonsense. And I was flat broke. So when you're at that point in your life and you know that when you get up in the morning, if you don't have an opiate to get you out of a state of, they say your tank's on E when you wake up as an opiate addict. You're sick, your bones hurt, you're not well. And until you get your drug, you're not able to even function. So a sales day for a guy like that looks like wake up, take 2 Percocet, take a shower, shave. You don't have breakfast because that'll kill the buzz. That's why all drug addicts are skinny, because you don't want to mess up your buzz. You ingest the drugs. So if you ingest food, you taper off the buzz. And you just eat pills all day. You go to work, you sell some shit and you scratch up whatever money you have left, or you rob somebody, or you steal something, or you pawn off your girlfriend's DVD collection. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So unfortunately, I was at such a meaningless point in my life There was nothing for me, man. So my mindset was, and I didn't know this then. If you asked me then, I would have just said, dude, I needed money to get high. But reflecting on that, I can tell you full stop that my subconscious mind was taking over. And it knew that if I got the money, I'd get high, I'd feel better, because even your subconscious mind wants you to feel better physically. And I would have gone to a different state and tried to reestablish. And at that time, somehow I had myself convinced that $10,000 was going to restart me somewhere with a new life and rehab and a car and all these things. You know, you make these things up in your mind when you're in that state. The other side of the coin was, if I get caught, I'm going to go to prison and control will be taken from me. And I think that's what I was after, man.
Did you wear a mask or anything?
Yeah. I wore a silver Nike tracksuit, like a hoodie and sweatpants, Timberland boots, a bandana, sunglasses, and went in there looking like I was jogging and robbing a bank.
How'd you get caught?
So interesting, I didn't get caught. So what happened, I left the establishment. I had a very, very, actually, reflecting on it and talking to law enforcement, it was a great plan. I parked the vehicle several blocks down the road. I went in looking one way with my hoodie and my tracksuit on. When I left the bank, I went in the backwoods and ran through the backwoods, hid behind a dumpster, pulled my hoodie and my pants off, put them in the same bag that had the money in it. Underneath it, I had a dress shirt, a tie, and dress slacks. So I went in the woods looking like a jogger, and I came out the other side of the woods at the parking lot where the getaway car was parked, looking like a businessman coming out of Delta Sonic. So it was a pretty good plan. I left, I took off. I ended up leaving straight from there, and it was my girlfriend's car, so I picked her up at work. My heart's beating through my chest. She's asking me what's wrong. I told her I did a line of coke, So ultimately, we went home. Kids got some new shoes, and I paid the rent, and life was great for about 5 days. Went to the DMV, paid the fees, got my license back, and that was retribution for me, because at the time I was a car salesman, and I had gotten my driver's license taken, so I couldn't do my craft. That's why I couldn't make any money. Of course, that's what I had myself convinced. But I came home from the DMV after finally getting my license back. I went to the laundromat. We picked up our clothes. We went home, and then it was like this moment of clarity. It was like one of those video montages that you see in like an action movie, where the guy starts remembering, wait, I saw this car back there, and I saw that car over here, and then all these cars that I was recollecting all converged on the front lawn at once. There was like 6 unmarked police cars.
So how'd they catch you?
The landlord. When I left the place wearing the stuff, I didn't change anywhere. I left we had a ranch, and the landlord lived in the basement. Normally the landlord will live in the house and rent out the basement. This was an older retired woman, and she was hard up for cash, so she stayed in the basement. She rented out the upstairs to my girlfriend and I and our family. And apparently there was no car in the driveway, so I thought she wasn't home, and her dogs weren't barking, so I assumed she was not home. Come to find out, the planets aligned that day. Her dogs were at the veterinarian, and her car was in the shop, and she was in the backyard sunbathing or whatever the hell she was doing, and saw me leave the house dressed just like that with that car. After the bank robbery, the police kind of piece by piece started making it very obvious that they had no leads. They would show the video every night on the evening news. You can still look it up. It's online if you Google me. It's like all my cool business accomplishments and a bank robbery video, so you can't miss it. But she saw me leave the house, and each evening in the news, they would release more footage, more information. And then finally they showed this one angle that they had not shown before, which was me facing the teller, where you could see the glasses, the hoodie, the bandana, everything. And if you saw me that day like she did, it was plain as day that was me. And to her credit, she didn't say anything until she kind of divulged to her boyfriend that evening, who was an Onondaga County sheriff, retired. She's like, I think the guy that robbed that bank is living upstairs. And he says, what? And so he started looking into it, and a day later they found me. A rat, Brad. It was the rat.
Well, in a good way, though, that was a blessing.
Best day of my life.
Are you religious?
No.
So you didn't...
I don't disbelieve, but I believe in reality and the things I can touch, feel, and smell. And I believe there's a greater force that certainly kicks your ass if you push into it the wrong way.
You don't believe there's a creator?
I believe that something created all of this. I choose not to engage in that discussion simply because it's a slippery slope, but I'll certainly chop it up with you about it if you want.
But you believe there's a creator?
Whether it was a explosion of a particular atom at a particular time, a collision,
that couldn't have happened. There's too much order.
I've heard you speak on this.
I mean, at the end of the day, dude, when people say they don't believe that there's a God, it's like I always ask them, Well, I say creator because God makes you think like, angels and the whole story.
Yep.
But there's got to be a creator. And how you know there's a creator is because how can nothing create something?
Well, I don't believe it was nothing. I think
then there's a creator because there had to be something to create something. You can't create something from nothing. So at some point there was something.
So the question would then be, if it was nothing, how did the creator exist? And where did the creator come from? How did he become something? Who created him?
Well, that's the thing. You can't create nothing from something.
Right. So who created creator?
You can't create something from nothing. Well, then that shows you that there's a creator.
Well, the creator would have had to then been, by that logic, created by a creator.
How do you know that?
Because the same logic you just used on me, saying you can't have something without a creator of that thing.
So your logic holds a little water. I have to go investigate. I have to go now seek that.
That's
truth.
why I love you,
But I know that there's impossibility of something being created from nothing. Mm-hmm. But your question is valid. So how did the creator come into existence?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go I'm going to go seek.
Seek and ye shall find.
It's a good question.
You know what I find beautiful, though, is that discourse. Just to me, basic humanity, that discourse. And that's what I think, and not to get philosophical or political or any kind of other kind of AL, I think that that's what we lack, is the ability to engage in that discourse reasonably. See, I go into that conversation hoping to learn. I sit here going, boy, it's going to be humbling. But if Brad Lee unlocks the key to the universe right here in front of me and has me walking out this door believing in God, finally I'll understand what all these people are talking about. So that's why I engage in that discourse, is I'm looking for that. I think other people choose not to engage in that discourse because they don't want to hear that. I search for it. I want answers. I want to know why.
Well, then you're doing as the scripture tells us, which is seek. Seek and ye shall find.
Yeah, I just said that.
Yeah, so I'm seeking as well. That's why I always bring it up, because, I'm not necessarily religious for sure, but I am faith-based, meaning I believe there's a creator. Everything's too perfect, bro. You cut your skin without even you trying the chemicals, the beep, 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 they repair it.
Yeah.
Beep, 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 platelets and like, dude, come on.
I think there's a staunch argument for both sides. Where I stand on any of those issues is I would like to see it flushed out in front of me, piece by piece. I'm a logical guy. That's why in Paid to Persuade, we call it flow selling. Fundamental, logical, and obvious. And not to plug the sales, but fundamental in that you need to stick to core sales fundamentals. I think too many guys overcomplicate it and they trip over themselves.
Yes.
Logical, meaning if what you're saying to another individual is not something they can take from A to B themselves, if they need you to do it for them, it's not going to be wholesome or authentic and they're not going to receive it. And then the O is obvious. If it's obvious, if I'm showing you that the value in a product or a service far exceeds the ask, you're obviously going to buy it because that's human nature. So I approach life that way. And I think that's why we're so effective selling with the flow system, is because once an individual truly believes and understands what they're doing, the confidence goes through the roof. And you know just as well as I do, you can be the most intelligent salesperson in the world, but if you don't exude supreme confidence and go into that conversation owning the space, you're not going to be as effective as your potential. I think we could agree on that.
I would agree with you. There are other trainers that would not. However, everybody's got their own opinion. But you can see people's evidence. So the evidence shows that your process must work because you've got 3 successful car dealerships operating. You've made considerable amount of money, especially with a background like yours, because everybody thinks if you got a felony, you're screwed. And it's like, dude, that's not even true. Number one. Number two, that's mindset. That's just a screwed up mindset. So how old were you back in the bank robbery days? Bank
robbery happened at 29 years old. I spent my 30th birthday in prison.
So how old are you now?
40, just turned 40.
So it wasn't that long ago.
Oh, it was a decade, less than a decade.
Damn, dog. I'm in the room with a bank robber. Hey, but that's good. I always tell people, just for the record, I don't think the past defines people. I think people can change. And just because someone did something, like rob a bank, I don't necessarily think that cancels them out for life. Now, if you freaking raped a kid, I wouldn't agree the same thing.
I would hope you wouldn't allow me in your business if I did something like that.
Well, I wouldn't. If you know, you used to be, I used to rape kids and I got out of prison. Yeah, I ain't having you on my podcast, first of all.
Probably
Second of all,
my body out
there's certain things like I would not condone or look past. But, you know, people make mistakes, especially when they're on drugs, you know. Mm-hmm. They make mistakes. I've made mistakes. And again, I mean, like, I don't run around talking about, hey, I used to be this and that. But at the end of the day, everyone makes mistakes. The good news is, you know, if they're smart and they learn from them,
yes,
well, then they can find their way out of it. And then I think people deserve second chances.
I would agree,
even third chances.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And you said, you know, you don't believe the past defines somebody. And I understand what you meant by that. I think that we have to, somebody like me, and I'll speak simply on myself, and I always do that. I don't ever try to project on any other human being. But myself, I need to be defined by that past. I need to wake up every morning knowing that I was a drug addict and I was a bank robber. And those are the things that have molded me into what I am. Until my moral compass pointed so far south that the needle almost fell off the device, it wasn't until that point that I was able to hit rock bottom. And rock bottom is what gave me a launch pad to head back up and on a very staunch trajectory for success. What I'm saying ultimately is, those things, I think having come from there to get to here is far more meritorious than getting from 0 to 60, if you will, going from negative 100 to 110.
Sure, but I think you're motivated by it, not defined.
I would agree with that.
So anyway, so it wasn't that long ago. So you got out of prison.
Yep.
You probably went to some halfway house.
Did not. No, I actually got out of
state.
Yeah, state. Just got paroled.
So you just got let out. You had no money. You're obviously broke. What?
$40 and a bus ride home.
And you got home. Where'd you have to go? To your parents or some family member?
I paroled to my girlfriend's place at the time. She's a very nice woman, and I will always, to the end of time, my wife knows this. She's a very good woman. She held me down through a very tough time, and we mutually decided to part ways, and that we weren't the best people for each other.
Well, she wasn't a druggie.
No, not at all. She's just a very good human being, good mother, good everything. She just stuck by me through a time where realistically she should have dropped me like a bad habit because I caused them a lot of pain at that time. But they're just good people, you know. And I provided a lot of things financially for the family. I was a drug addict and I was broke, but I did pay their bills and I did do some nice things. But I was paroled to her house. I had $40. I met the parole officer, and the first question I asked him was, "Are you going to allow me to have my driver's license again?" And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I need to sell again. I cannot."
So you were already in car sales?
Yes.
So you knew how to sell. You knew that it was a good way to make money.
Yes, sir.
And so you got back. Boom, I'm going to go sell cars again.
Mm-hmm. I just knew that there was only one way that I was going to experience a reasonably successful life or decent income. You see, I didn't have any college education, man. We grew up in a very cookie cutter area, brother. It was so rural. There was 82 kids in my graduating class. I grew up around a family. My father told me, and no disrespect to him, this is just reality, and we've discussed it. He said, "Son, don't try to be great. Don't try to own businesses. Just be a manager. Fly under the radar. Make 70, 80 grand a year. If the shit hits the fan, it won't hit you. Stay off the spotlight and just live your life and figure out what makes you happy." And the whole time I'm sitting here like,
that's bad advice.
What's that? I would tend to agree with that. And the whole time I'm sitting there like, Dad, I'm not like that. Like, I was the black sheep. I was the outcast. And realistically, not to justify anything that I did, but I later on in life learned that the reason I was such a ravenous drug addict is because I had this lack of dopamine in me because I had ADD, and I was just searching for ways to increase that naturally. And the chase, right? The relentless pursuit of my potential and trying to become a college quarterback and trying to become a business owner and trying to become a police officer, just that pursuit is what elevated me, and it got the juices flowing in me, and it's what made me want to proceed and move farther in life. And I was continuously told, just knock it off, dude. Just calm down, just relax. And that was difficult for me, and that's where a lot of the pain came from. And when you're dealing with that, you're at a party and someone has a pill and someone has a beer, and next thing you know, you're just shooting the shit like everybody else. You got that dopamine fix. You're just kind of calm, and you realize, oh, this is how you function and be like everybody else. Everybody else are these calm conversationalists that are just conversing about the normal woes of life. that I never found interesting and I could never even align with. I was somewhere else trying to do something bigger or better, jumping a car off of a railroad track or trying to backflip my BMX bike off the roof of my log cabin, just something, an adrenaline junkie. And it was like, oh, it just takes a couple beers and a couple lines of Coke and an Oxycontin, and I can just sit here and shoot dumb conversation with these people. And that's why I became a drug addict, is it allowed me to conform. It allowed me to fit in.
Well, not only that, dude, but that Oxycontin shit, dude, that was supposedly heavily addictive stuff.
Oh, big time, bro. It owns you.
But
it's so physically
that might
addictive.
be why you were a drug addict, because you took one in the first place.
Well, right, but in the early stages of my addiction, man, it was alcohol, muscle relax. It was what they call a dumpster. It was whatever I could put in me that would alter my state of mind and get me to a place where I wasn't dealing. Elon Musk says something on Joe Rogan's podcast, and Joe says something like, I think people would love to be you for a day. And Elon says, no, you wouldn't want to be me for a day. Nobody would want to be me for a day. And he says, why? He talks about in his mind, there's this incessant perpetuity of explosions going off in his head, ideas, thoughts, grandiose visions. And I'm not saying I'm Elon Musk, and which I'm a big fan.
Have you read the book?
What's that?
Have you read his book?
No, sir.
Not his book about him?
No, I've seen it. I've meant to read it, but I haven't.
I'm going through it right now, and coincidentally enough, and I'm not saying it just because he's Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I'm saying, dude, him and I have a lot of similarities.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And again, I'm not calling myself Elon Musk, nor am I elevating myself to that plane. But what I'm saying is when you constantly have to calm down a noise in your mind because it's telling you, oh, that guy's jumping a dirt bike, off a mountain. Give that a shot. That might get you your fix. Or this guy's doing high-level business negotiation and flying planes first class across the country. That might get you your fix. I was just seeking some sort of grandiose fix of adrenaline or dopamine or whatever it was. You later discover it's dopamine in the body. It's your feel-good chemical. It's what, the same thing that happened the first time we sat down for a half hour and we're shooting the shit and going back and forth. Like when somebody engages in self-talk, it releases dopamine. That's a proven fact. That's in our P2P on the online platform. It's part of the 0 to 60 mindset. When you get your customer to engage in self-talk, when they start speaking voluntarily, you of course get them to engage, but then they kind of take it off on their own and start talking about their family or their hobbies or whatever. They're actually escalating their dopamine levels, and your ability or your chances of closing that deal go up like 30 to 40%. We're all about putting the numbers in your favor and giving yourself the best chance of closing the deal, obviously. In life, that translates to, that dopamine escalation. It's what we're all after. And I'm not saying the world's full of drug addicts because it has nothing to do with an exogenous chemical. But when you're able to recruit a response in your body that makes you feel good and euphoric, naturally you're going to be after that. Certain human beings, the majority of society has that. There's a small subset, the Brandon Novaks, the Eric Spoffords of the world that didn't have that, the Luke Lunks of the world. We didn't have that, so we chased that. And that's why we got addicted to drugs. And because the drugs were so damn good, like you said, that's why we stayed addicted.
So you got out, you went back to the girlfriends, you started selling cars, obviously never screwed up again, correct?
No, sir.
So you just started selling cars, saving your money, but at some point in time, you then had the opportunity to open dealerships.
Mm-hmm. So I was working for a collision center. They fired me because they found out I was a felon, even though I disclosed it on my job application. During that time, somebody reached out to me that kept in touch with me when I was in prison. An old, I guess you'd say friend. He's more of an acquaintance, and now to this day, he's not somebody I choose to even speak of. But he was an individual that we had worked at dealerships together, and he had gotten his dealer's license, and he knew that I was not only a good deal closer, but I had good business acumen as well. So he reached out to me, and it was more like, I know you just got out of prison. I know you just lost that job. I'll give you my checkbook. I'll give you a dealer plate. I'll give you a car to drive. I just want you to run my operation. We'll split everything. Nice. And I was like, well, dude, I don't have a driver's license. I can't do that. And he said, take my Amex, pay off all your stuff, get your driver's license. I know it's going to be worth the investment. I know what you can do. So that got me to where I was running a used car dealership and very successful doing that. In like 11 months, I made he and I like, $180,000 or something like that, which isn't miracle money, but it's certainly more than $40 you leave prison with. So that transpires. He sees the amount of income coming in and decides one day, now mind you, he went back to working a 9 to 5 in the car business. He went back to selling cars because that's what he was good at. He wasn't good at buying inventory. He wasn't good at engaging customers at his own place of business. So he handed the keys over to me and I started crushing it. Excuse me. Well, what he decided to do 11 months in was tell his boss off, say, I don't need this. I got $180 coming in over here. And then came to me and said, dude, I'll just work here with you and we'll do twice as much business. And I reminded him gently that he wasn't successful running the business, which is why he called me in, and we had he was very arrogant and we had a conflict. And I just said, listen, dude, I'm going to continue to run this the way I run it, and you're going to continue to get the check that you're getting, or I'm going to leave, because I just knew what he was going to do. So he talked me into staying. A month later, he's doing exactly what I knew he was going to do, not paying off trade-ins. We've had conversations around this that other organizations we're familiar with, but just doing all those markers of a downhill trajectory for business. And I said, I'm done. I had a toolbox there because I worked on some of the cars myself. I did everything start to finish, and I bounced. And he went out of business 6 months later. Wife divorced him, went back into heroin, and it was all downhill from there. So I went back to work, a 9-to-5 job for an amazing gentleman who was a partner and a friend to this day, who's just a great human being. And when I went back to work for him, he caught wind of the fact that I was a successful car dealer with that other gentleman for a little while, and he's an entrepreneur. So he comes to me and he says, I've noticed that you're the tenacious salesperson you've always been. You're my number one guy, but you used to be my number one guy by double the volume. Now you're my number one guy by like just enough to stay number one every month, to feed your ego. He's like, what's that about? And I said, dude, I'm a little disenchanted. I had a taste of running the whole show. I had a taste of business ownership. I had a taste of, 50% of the money instead of 15. And he says, yeah, I understand. The next day he comes to me and he says, I want to offer you an investment. I want to offer you $150,000 to start a car dealership. Do you think you can do it with that? And I said, yeah. And he said, what do you think of my property up there on such and such street? I won't disclose it, but I said, I could do something with that. He said, let's do it. I said, just like that? He said, just like that. And 2 days later, he handed me a checkbook with $150,000 in it. So for the people listening out there, and I don't want to get prophetic, but for those people that are saying, well, I can't get this done because I'm a felon, or I'm a past drug addict, or I just, it's not for me, or how am I supposed to get any kind of investment? When you work so hard for somebody and you pursue your potential so passionately that another individual who is an entrepreneur at a higher level takes notice and sees the level of efficacy by which you operate, the opportunity will come to you. Success brings success. There it is. So he saw me just killing it, and he's like, man, if this guy takes the reins at his own thing, he's gonna become a millionaire. And he made a comment like that, and I kind of laughed it off. And 3.5 years later, I was worth a few $1 million. So I bought him out in 2020. We scaled it to 3 car dealerships. It's like a $12 million company. It ain't no light speed VT, but it's a respectable little gig.
CNY Drives.
Yes, sir.
Why CNY?
CNY, Central New York. It was actually a website that I created to drive credit applications. And when I opened the dealerships, I felt like in order to be highly purposed and effective, that we had to kind of narrow to one particular strategy or subset. And I knew that I was very strong with financing, particularly subprime. I knew the area that we operated in had a high saturation of subprime customers and low income. And I said, well, then let's just optimize this outfit for those people and just focus on serving them. These are people that are used to a poor customer experience. These are people that are used to being treated like the redheaded stepchild. I said, let's just invite them in here. Instead of being the dealership that when this type of customer walks in, everybody kind of shrugs their shoulders and walks away and lets the new guy deal with them. Let's be the dealership that welcomes them in, that invites them in numbers and treats them very well. Because when you treat that subset of customers, someone who's a little downtrodden and on hard times, and they've dealt with nothing other than people who are nefariously trying to reach as deeply into their wallet as they possibly can and show them no service whatsoever, they don't get a warm meal on the airplane. They don't even get on the airplane, right? So I said, let's just take real good care of these people. Let's just give them an excellent customer experience. And we did. And we very quickly became a well-known entity in that area. And, our marketing budget, I don't think increased after year one. Just repeating referrals. They were coming in left and right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately with the subprime, they're almost, so amazed of just getting approved. They'll go tell all their friends and family, hey, go see these guys. They got me approved.
Yeah. And the beautiful part about that is a lot of those people aren't quite as bad off as they think they are. They're just not educated, right?
Yeah.
And the lack of information is usually the problem. So you end up getting a few customers come in and you can do really, really well by them, a much better approval than they thought they were going to get. And then that just furthers that positive response.
So that evolved into being able to train and teach people how to close deals, make money, be successful selling?
Well, ultimately what I realized, to try to show as much humility as possible, is I wasn't that good of a car dealer. I wasn't a very good merchandiser. I could buy inventory because I knew cars well, but my marketing was decent. My inventory turn was decent. Our customer experience was very good, but our outreach was decent. What I eventually realized when, vendors would come in and they would hear my salespeople talk to customers, they'd be like, dude, where'd you get that guy? And I'm like, Burger King. What do you mean? Well, how's he know how to talk like that, man? Because I trained him to. Where'd you get that girl over there? Verizon. Well, how'd you get her? Because she was like a poor performer and she was looking for a different job. Well, how'd she do that? I trained her. And that cadence continues for long enough, and you hear it from enough people that you hold credible, and you start to ponder, am I just really good at training salespeople? Is it not that I'm a great car dealer? Because there's a dynasty of car dealers in my family, and that's why everybody thought I was a decent car dealer, although my grandfather never owned an inventory of more than, I think, 30 cars at a new Ford store, and my father managed new car franchises. None of them were ever used car dealers, at large. So I just realized eventually that my people were just killer closers, and they could shut anything down that walked through the door. And at that point, I had some resources. I'd been doing business and putting some steaks in the freezer, if you will. And my wife says, you love selling. Like that's why you wake up in the morning, is that debate, that conversation, that getting people to see it your way. I said, yeah. She goes, and I've never seen a human being be able to transpose that ability onto somebody who's nowhere near your skill level or your talent level. She says, you simplify that process so much. And I love my wife for this, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today without her. I can say that wholeheartedly. But she convinced me that I was very good at giving that ability to another individual. So I did kind of a litmus test. I hired a bunch of brand new people, and I packaged a training. I made it very simple, compartmentalized, and only like a few key points. And we gave it to those people, and I tried to have as little interaction as possible. I tried to emulate kind of a training experience with as little interaction from me as possible. Like they were to read it out of a book kind of and watch a few videos, hint, hint, wink, wink. And they killed it, man. They did a great job. So what that showed me was it wasn't me. It wasn't me bringing that information to them and massaging them into these wonderful salespeople. It was the information. I had distilled selling down to such a simple process that truly anybody could hear the information. And once you get them to receive it and believe it and have confidence in those words, and then you also recruit in them a higher level of confidence in their own abilities, and then you put them through the paces and you show them, listen, all you have to do, and the best part is when you're training them, you're just showing them that they're deploying these techniques, and every time they don't close a deal, you bring them back to the technique and say, we'll see where you missed number 2. And they're like, oh shit, yeah. And every time they don't close one, you show them where they miss a spot. And every time they do close one, you ask them, did you go all the way through with it from start to finish? And they, yeah, I did. And all of a sudden, they realize when they stick to the program, they close everything they touch. And when they don't, they got excuses.
And this is the Paid to Persuade program.
Flow selling, man. Fundamental and logical
selling.
and obvious. It's very simple. We leverage something called the big 3. It's what brought you here today. What were you hoping to accomplish? Well, the third is what are you hoping to accomplish. In the middle, it's establishing your buying power. And like I said, any veteran salesman is going to hear those things and chuckle, but it's how we teach it. Okay, everything is leveraged in the rule of 3, and that's the best way for the human mind to receive data. If it's just one thing, it doesn't seem extraordinary enough to be worth remembering. If it's more than 3 things, 4, 5, 6, it's too much to remember. 2 is just a pair. So 3 is that number where they believe it's diverse enough for it to be a functional, effective program, but it's enough where they can still remember it. And every kind of substrata of the big 3 is all broken down into 3. So when it comes to explaining buying power, it's all broken down to 3 things, the 3 types of financing. When it comes to interrogating the customer, the compassionate interrogation process is broken down into 3 things. And what it boils down to is any human being can receive this information and become an incredibly effective salesperson and close. We've seen 25 to 30% higher than national averages. And honestly, that's just by receiving it in video format. When I intervene, it's much stronger than that.
Wow. So my question would be, anyone that's out there not in sales, or in sales for that matter, but mostly not in sales, if they learn this, they're able to go out and get in sales.
1,000%.
And to me, it's not just cars; it's anything. Mm-hmm. So you can apply yours to anything. And I want to break into it a little bit, see what those substratas are.
Let's roll.
But the point I want to make to people listening is, because I always tell people, if you're not making $300,000-400,000 grand a year, you better start doing something, because dude, the rich and the poor, the gap is widening. And people say, well, what do you recommend for these guys to do? Well, number one, jump, because that gap's getting bigger. So you better jump now and start swimming towards the rich side.
I would agree with that.
And to me, you have to sell something. I've never met anybody successful ever that wasn't selling something. Mm-hmm. And there's people that are good at sales and there's people that are bad at sales. And to me, the bad ones just don't know they're doing it, or they're fighting the fact that they're doing it. Oh, I hate salesmen. Oh, I don't like sales. Mm-hmm. So they just fight it their whole life and they fail their whole life. But I've seen so many people struggling financially, and I've personally taught them. I teach them to sell. They start to sell and close and persuade and influence, and boom, they're now making $100,000, and then $180,000, then $300,000, and then next thing you know, dude, they're winning. Because in my mind, you got to make a couple $100,000 a year to have enough left over to even invest and really get out of the rat race. So I tell people every time, you got to get out of the rat race. If you want to get out of the rat race, step one, you got to sell something. That's it. So everybody listening, if you can take this, paid to persuade, and just internalize, it sounds like it's easy as hell. We'll see in a minute, because I got some questions for you.
Rock and roll.
But if you can just take this information, internalize it, and then apply it, you're out of the rat race in a matter of time. How long you think it takes someone to learn your stuff?
To learn it and know it and be able to recite it back, it's going to, again, it depends on how much time you devote to it, but most people can get it done in 2 weeks or less. Going through it a couple times and really receiving the information. The process that's most effective is obviously the application of the method. So getting out into the workplace and actually deploying this is what's going to really hone them and make them better. To your point, though, I think that...
Will you give them all a job?
What's that?
You can't give them all a job.
No, sir.
I can.
You can?
I can.
Should I send them over here?
You should send everybody over here.
Okay.
Well, the reason I'm saying is because this podcast reaches a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I know some people are going to be like, well, shit, dude, let's see how good this is. Because if it's true, it's true. But then, what do I sell? And I don't know. And so it doesn't connect. So that's why I started my real companies. Real merchant services, real financial, real solar, real whatever. Those are my real companies. Because of this exact reason. Mm-hmm. I was teaching people how to sell, close, persuade, and then they'd go out and sell and close and persuade the wrong shit. Okay. And they still aren't making money. They're like, I thought you said if I sold. Yeah, but dude, you're selling stuff that you can't make money. Like in the car business, you can make $200,000-$400,000 a year. You're probably not going to make $1 million. Now you could. I know ones that have, but that's not normal. Normal, good car salesman. Couple $100,000 a year, $300-$400. So it's cars, it's freaking furniture, it's jets, it's freaking plastic surgery. Doesn't matter what you sell, but you're gonna sell something. Mm-hmm. So all you need is the skills. Then you actually need the job. So if you can teach them the skills,
you can give them the job.
I'll give them the job at one of my companies.
Sounds like we got a team.
That's our offer to the listeners. If you ain't making the kind of money you're talking about, go learn from him. Once he's delivered his information and certified you in the frickin' paid to persuade technique or discipline, I will say.
Discipline.
And you're saying if they do, dude, they're badasses.
100%. And I try not to coin it with the P2P program or the P2P technique. It's just paid to persuade. It's just what it is. It's an understanding. It's a state of being. You get paid to persuade. So that's what we call it. And it's very simple. And to your point, brother, I think the barrier that everybody needs to get past to go down the path of enlightenment that you're speaking of, which is I've seen so many people go down it, and you're absolutely right. When they buy in and they understand that it's actually doable, the income ceiling is unlimited. There isn't one, because once you've got the process down, it's just a matter of input, and then you continue to hone that process, and you find higher margins and better places to do it at. And it's
you know what else you do?
What? Expand your thinking.
You go, whoa. This is freaking possible.
So let me something incredibly important that I haven't spoken to. If you go in our online training platform, it's not just paid to persuade, okay? There's two entirely different lessons that you have to partake in. One is in the mindset section. It's called the 0 to 60 framework. And that sales training is gated with that mindset training. You cannot receive paid to persuade unless you've received the 0 to 60 framework. And it's from what you just spoke on. If somebody wants to become an effective salesperson, there's certain mental barriers that they must overcome. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go into sales thinking that salespeople are bad people, it's a nefarious activity. You can't be a morally sound person.
You gotta lie, cheat, and steal.
100%. You gotta be a snake oil salesman. Salespeople are scumbags. When you go in with that mindset, you're not going to receive the information properly, because you're going to be going, well, I'm watching this training and I'm learning this thing about this not so savory activity. And when the mind isn't receiving information in an authentic way, when it's open and ready to receive all of it, you're not going to get it. Furthermore, you're not going to execute upon it in the right manner, because you don't believe in it, right? The same way that, and we talked about this earlier, the Faraday cage, right? They put human beings into a Faraday cage, which is just a room devoid of any radio frequency, any gamma rays. I'm not going to speak out of turn on things I don't know, but essentially no other frequencies are allowed in or out of the room. It's just whatever is emitted from the human body. And they measured people in their emotional states, okay? And what they discovered were two things: the law of constructive interference and the law of destructive interference, which means that if you and I are speaking like right now, this would be constructive interference. We're both in a creative mindset. We're both in an authentic mindset. We're speaking from a place that we know a lot about and we're very well versed in, and we're building a conversation and we're bringing value because we're both combining our frequencies and moving, right? You have the law of destructive interference, which is the antithesis of that, which would be kind of how our conversation was going on religion, to an extent, where we had different views and the two frequencies meet and they actually diminish both sides a little bit more, and eventually kind of peters out and we go away from it, just like we did. Excuse me. What they learned in those studies was that the highest volume of frequency emitted by a human being is when they're speaking authentically. When they're speaking about something they know to be true, and they're professing it to another human being, the frequency that they emit, it's unmistakable by another human being. And it's not a conscious thing. It's not like you're like, oh, the wave's hitting me, I can feel it now. You're hearing the information. You're like, God damn, it's just like listening to a good keynote. Just like the speech that you gave where you were talking about your past and you got emotional, and I cried. Full stop. I'll admit it right here on your podcast, dude. I'm in my bed. I'm like, babe, Brad's talking about he grew up, his dad came and he got him, and the doctors, he made him save him. And I'm like all wet behind the eyes, like, what the fuck am I doing, man? But it was authentic, and that's why I received it that way, right? So step one, a human being cannot be an effective salesperson unless they believe that being an effective salesperson is an honorable trait. It simply can't be done, right? Step two is overcoming barriers that we have, right? So when I was younger, think of the things I just told you that my father told me. And just so everybody knows, I'm not dogging my dad. I love my dad. He's an excellent human being. I would do anything for him. But he just comes from a school of thought that's so fundamentally different than what my mind, body, spirit, whatever the hell you want to call it, was forcing out into the atmosphere. I wanted to be big. I wanted to be grandiose. I wanted to do amazing things. And that was my frequency of authenticity. But the barriers that I had were, well, dad says I shouldn't do that. The teachers say that I should shut up and sit down. And, the girls say I should just play football and be happy I got a scholarship. And so you end up dumbing yourself down, and you're not able to be effective at the level that you could be as far as your potential is concerned, right? So if you want to make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year like you're speaking on, which is, I don't want to say is easy, but is more possible than I think most human beings would possibly be willing to admit or believe, okay?
100%.
If you want to do that, you have to be able to push at this thing full force. And if you have barriers, right? For me, my parents never made more than 70, 80 grand a year. The house that we lived in was a $65,000 house. Dad bought a $110,000 house and could barely foot the bill for the mortgage. And mom and dad got divorced behind all the financial stress. And I'm like, damn, I don't ever want a $110,000 house because my marriage will fall apart. So do you think I was going after $1 million career? No, $110,000 house was a pain point. So those were my personal barriers. I was a drug addict. I came from a lineage of addicts. I came from a lineage of car dealers. That's all I would ever be at most. nobody in my path that I came across ever made more than 80 to 100 grand a year. So 120 isn't doable. I'm not an NFL player, right? So a human being having those kind of barriers cannot get to the level of wealth that you're speaking on, okay? And it's not even wealth, it's just decent money, right? We know this, you and I know this.
I call it it's just a ticket. It's
Yeah.
a ticket to get out. It's not everything you need to get out, but it's a ticket.
Yep, it gets you started. And you, like, for instance, you know, for anybody watching this podcast going, well, who is this dude? I've never seen Luke Lunkenheimer before, and he sounds pretty damn good, okay? How I got here in this room, because, bro, I'm telling you, you know, this may not be something that you think on because you are who you are, but there's a million motherfuckers watching this thing right now going, dude, how's he get there? How does somebody get in that chair, right? I've seen Patrick Bet David here. I've seen, you know, you know, on the spot right now, I'm not going to rattle off every guest you've ever had, but some of the biggest of the bigs have been in this chair. So how the hell did I get here? How did I get here? I came to this place and I recorded my virtual training platform, and I told the salesperson that sold it to me, I'll do this under one condition. Well, okay, what's that condition? I want 30 seconds. You can ask Mira this. Maybe he already told you. I said, I want 30 seconds with Bradley. He goes, well, I can probably get you a minute, man. I was like, I want a photo opportunity. I want to shake his hand, and I want to thank him for his content because it's helped me. A lot of things have helped me. He goes, okay. And I looked at my wife and I said, I'm going to melt that motherfucker's face when I meet him. And what did I do? I came into your office. I sat down just like this, and I stood up and you said, what's up, man? I'm Bradley. I said, I'm Luke Lunkenheimer, paid to persuade. That motherfucker. Didn't I? You remember that? I got it on video.
You said that motherfucker?
I said that motherfucker. And you said exactly this. Luke Lunkenheimer, paid to persuade, that motherfucker, huh? I said, yep. You said, all right, then sit down. And we engaged in a fun tennis match of debate and discourse, and we talked about de Bergerac and all this other shit, and we were laughing, and, you know, by the time it was all said and done, you were asking me, hey, dude, you really got to fly out tomorrow? Let's do this. You had like some master class you were doing. You wanted me to hop on there and say something. And in that moment, I walked out of there, and just to be perfectly real with you, I got in the car and I started driving back to the hotel.
Did you cry again?
I did, dude.
Oh, right.
Not cry. I didn't cry, but I teared up, and because it was a moment of validation. Because, Brad, the climb for me on the ladder of success has been a million sons of bitches telling me it's not possible. So every time I hit a rung on that ladder, I go, yeah, gotcha, motherfucker. You know, listen to what Patrick Bet David said. You find that all of these grandiose human beings, right? All these people that have done major things, it seems to be a cadence to what they say. All the way from Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, up through Patrick Bet David and Donald Trump, all the way up to Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and
Bradley.
the famous Brad fucking Lee. Yeah, buddy, drop that bitch. Very nice. So my point being, it's not like we're unearthing information that is buried deep within the Earth's core. These are timeless things. These are things that have been unearthed and brought to the masses many, many times. The problem is people aren't listening for them. They're not receiving them. And when they do, they've got those barriers. And well, that doesn't apply to me. That's just some rich son bitch saying that, right?
Yep.
Well, I started listening. And I'm like, all right, let me read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Let me read, you know, Dale Carnegie's book there, the How to Make Friends and Influence People.
How to Win.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah, and just all these classics. And then after a while, I'm like, basically push out into the marketplace with tenacious effort, have a good moral compass, treat people the way you want to be treated, make sure the amount of value that you bring to your customer exceeds what they're paying, follow up with them and give them an excellent customer experience, and most importantly, learn to sell. Warren Buffett said it to this group of Harvard understudies, I think it was, and I could be misquoting. It might have not been Harvard understudies, but there was a group of students, and they were given a Q&A with Warren, and the question they asked was, what tip could you give us that would make us millionaires the fastest? And they were looking for a stock tip or like a hedge fund tip. And he looks at him and he says, one tip to make you a millionaire, learn to sell. And if Warren believes it, I think anybody can buy that ticket, right? And the bottom line is, dude, you can be intelligent, you can be loud, you can be verbose, you can be effective, but if you can't persuade somebody to see it your way, it's going to be a tough climb, man.
You know what else he said? They asked him, what is the single best investment I can make with X amount of dollars? Not very many. Mm-hmm. I forget what it was. And he said, the highest ROI you will ever get is self-development. So in other words, invest that money in yourself, your skills. That'll be the highest return you'll ever get.
Because everything else follows.
And learn to sell. So I hadn't heard about the learn to sell one. I heard about invest in yourself. I just thought, what's worked for me? Why am I where I'm at? 100% my ability to sell, close, and persuade people, to build relationships, to communicate. People say, well, Brad, you say ain't and this. Listen, that's communication, fool. It's the ability to communicate is to get someone to understand. Communication is understand. A lot of people think communication is, well, I do think I would be instrumental in perpetuating the high quality image of this endeavor. I think you should employ the thought of perhaps, that's not communication. I mean, it is communication, but communication is getting people to understand.
100%.
I break shit down simply. And I do the same thing. I don't do sales training anymore. I have other endeavors and businesses, but I still do sales training because of my system. And I want to show people examples. So I just do sales because that's what I used to do. But I break things down to the simplicity. And the simplicity, believe it or not, ends up being genius. Logic. I use the acronym LOGIC. Leverage, obvious gain, intelligence, and common sense. Like, it's not that difficult. And people say, well, I can't sell because of this, that, and the other thing. Listen, anyone can sell. Introverts can sell. Extroverts can sell. You just need a source of information. So Paid to Persuade is a source of information. The next thing you need is a job. So what I'm telling people that are listening that might want to take a little chance and freaking call Luke Lunkenheimer or go to @LukeLunk on social media and say, brother, I heard you. I want to win. I want to get out of the rat race. I want to provide for my family. I want to change my life like you did. I want your information. Then, once they successfully do that, if you say, Brad, they successfully did that, I will give them a job at one of my companies, because I have companies that I can hire 1 million people if I can find 1 million kick-ass closers. So I have a scalable company. I have several. I'll give them choices even. So go to you to get the education, come to me for the job, and boom, change your life.
And we'll have to figure out what contract we're going to put into place that when I vet these people and bring them to you, gets me my piece of the action.
Well, I was going to say, well, when I send them to you, I get a piece of the action.
Yes, sir, you do.
Above and beyond my piece of the action.
1,000%.
No, I don't really care, dude. Listen, why? Because honestly, believe it or not, I want to show people how easy it is. And I think one day, if I have, 1,000 people that contacted you, learned to sell, and I gave them a job, they're going to be making me money by working with me.
Yes, sir.
So I'll make my money. I don't need nothing. I just want people to go, hey, I like this Luke dude. And that's why you sat so long in my office, is because I could tell you were real. I resonate with real people. I don't really care what people have done in the past. I care what people are doing now. You're out there winning. You're teaching people how to win. You got a methodology. Like, dude, my original thing was called the Real Deal Lease Presentation. And I taught people how to convince people to lease instead of finance. And everyone's like, well, it's like, listen, I could get someone to lease a car so fast, it would blow your mind. And this was back when nobody wanted to lease.
Yep.
Now everybody knows it's good. Coincidentally, it's better for you than the bank. It's a much smarter way to purchase. And I developed a simple way to explain customers. And so I patented it, or copyrighted it actually. It's Real Deal Lease Presentation. And it's still used in dealerships all over the country. I showed people how to get a customer that says, no, I'm not leasing a car. My dad said never to lease.
Do you know what people don't understand about a lease? What the vast
You can't even
majority
say lease without my last name in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's cute, man. People don't understand that what they're doing with a lease is simply paying the depreciation that they're going to suffer anyways over the course of their term of financing. And the question to me is simple. Would you like to know what your depreciation is going to be and know exactly where you stand 3 years from now with a simple mileage limitation? Or would you like to guess? And sure, there's a minute chance that you might have some equity because the market does something insane, or there's the 87.5% chance that you're going to be negative just like everybody else. Wouldn't you like like to know what that number is going to be? And that's something that we use in Paid to Persuade called the pre-frame. We don't say, hey man, would you like to lease something? We say, let me ask you a question. Is it frustrating to know that 3 years from now, you're not going to know what your trade's worth? Yeah, it's frustrating to know that. And let me ask you a question. If somebody said that I just need you to limit your driving to 15,000 miles a year and I can guarantee you what your vehicle's going to be worth in a few years, that'd be something. I mean, you wouldn't hate them for that, right? Well, no, in fact, I think that'd be a really good thing, right? And, let's say some wizard popped out of a bottle and said, I can guarantee you what your truck will be worth 3 years from now if you just keep it under 45,000 miles. That'd be like amazing, wouldn't it? Well, yeah, it'd be pretty dope, man. Well, that's what a lease is, sir. So by the sounds of it, and with what you're saying to me right now, is that you're actually a very good candidate for a lease, and we can go ahead and set that up for you. That's a pre-frame. That's something that we use in our system. You don't just ask the question. You set yourself up to where you cannot receive a no.
Well, let's break into that, because if when I taught people how to lease, they didn't even know they were getting convinced of a lease.
That you don't think that's a problem?
What do you mean?
Well, let me re-ask the question. Actually, let me clarify.
I didn't say I hoodwinked them.
They knew they were signing a lease when they signed the lease.
Of course.
Okay.
But like when they would say, I don't want a lease, because they'd always say, I don't want a lease.
Yep.
My first saying was, folks, we personally don't care whether you lease or finance, because to us, we're gonna get the money from the bank either way. So it's all cash to us.
Yep.
But let me show you something. Boom, 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 boom. They'd go, well, what would be the payment? And I'd go, one moment.
Funny you ask.
Yeah, one moment. Let me go find that out. And I'd come back, bam. You get more for the car, you get more for the payment, and most people are payment buyers anyway.
Of course.
People come in, hey, how much is that? Well, are you paying cash? No. Well, then what does it matter? Because quite frankly, if I could get you $1 million Lamborghini for $300 a month, would you take it? Well, of course I would. Okay, then it's not a price that you're worried about. It's a payment, isn't it? Because that's what you got to live with, isn't it? I'd get them off price, put them on payment. But the lease presentation every time, they would say, I don't want a lease. Well, personally, we don't care whether you lease. And by the way, this is the beginning of the presentation.
100%.
You don't even know you're being presented, is what I should.
Because that indifference is a fundamental technique that everybody should use in selling. See,
quite truthfully, it's the truth. People don't know. Car dealers get a check from the bank, bro. You're not financing it with them. They don't care if you lease or purchase. It's all cash to them. The reason they want you to lease rather than purchase is because they can get more advanced. They can freaking unbury you out of your trade. And quite frankly, if you're not savvy, they can charge you more for the car than if you're negotiating on price.
And they see you back in 3 years as well.
And there's a lot of other benefits. But I mean, again, the reason a dealer wants you to lease is so they can make more or other benefits. Why more? Well, because the price becomes a cap cost, and there's all these little things that if you're not savvy, they could sell you the car for more than you would have had you purchased it.
100%.
Well, so I thought you said it was better for leasing. I'm assuming all things equal.
Right.
And not only that, if you understand the cap cost is just the price, make sure you don't pay too much. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't worry so much about the price of a car. I'd worry about the payment, because that's what you got to live with, man. If you told me right now, Brad, I got a freaking Rolls-Royce Cullinan, brand new, Black Series, 690, fully loaded, $450 a month, I'm in it.
Yeah.
I don't really care what it costs.
Are you asking what the term is? Are you saying for 220
I don't care
months,
what
you
the
don't
term.
care?
I don't, dude. You give it to me for $495 a month. I'm an
driving
owner. Yeah, I'm a leaser.
I'm a lessor.
I don't care. And by the way, it would have to be a lease, because there'd have to be some sort of future option to bail out.
Right.
But point being is, most people don't realize that. They go in there and they're taught from people how to get the best deal, and they end up walking out of there with a car for the best price, but not the best payment, not 100%. The best car, etc.
You ever see, I mean, how many customers did you come across, and I would say you ever seen, you saw them a million times. How many customers did you come across in the car business that you knew were leaving with a payment that was way outside their comfort zone just because they wanted to stick to their druthers? They go, I don't ever finance for more than 48 months. Well, sir, you've been buying cars for how long now? 23 years. Well, 23 years ago, they were a lot less expensive and your monthly payment was a lot lower. You do realize that $48,000 truck with interest for 48 months is going to be $1,200 a month, yeah? Yep. You knew that? Yep. And then the wave of inauthenticity hits and you know they're full of it. And you're like, listen, sir, let me ask you a question. Yeah. If you pay $1,200 a month on this vehicle, whether you finance it for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 years, you're going to pay it off in the same amount of time. How would you like to know that at Christmas time, when money gets a little tight and you could use a few scooches extra in the bank, that your payment's only going to be $600? That's all you have to make. I tell customers to treat their car payment like a credit card minimum payment. Get the least monthly payment you can possibly get, as long as you're not making a ridiculous sacrifice on APR. For instance, if 36 to 48 months is 6.99% and 84 to 96 months is 16.99%, well, then that's a whole horse of a different color, right? But if it's 6.99% for 48 months or 7.25% for 96 months, finance that son of a bitch for 96 months, because you don't have to pay that nasty payment. Now, if you want it done in 48 months, make those payments the same way you would if it was a 48-month note. But on that 1 month where things don't go so well, wouldn't it be nice to know your payment is half of what it would have been? The answer is, of course. And
dang, where do I sign?
What's that? Right on the dropping bombs button.
Hey, so paid to persuade.
Yes, sir.
You said there's 3 things. The first one was...
It's the big 3.
The big 3.
What brought you here?
What brought you here?
Yeah.
Now, what's the subsets?
The subset, so the subsets are off of financing. There's a couple different places, but what's important to understand about the big 3 is it's simply a stimuli for asking questions, right? So they are stimuli. So when you ask somebody what brought you here today, most salespeople, the customer is going to say, well, I was driving by.
Or I'm just looking.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Okay. And then the rookie salesperson or the person who hasn't received proper training goes, oh, okay. Well, what are you just looking for? Right? Well, I'm looking for a pickup truck. Oh, okay. Well, what color pickup truck? Well, a red one. 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive, quad cab, extended cab, And the customer says, well, that's what I'm looking for. You got one? Yeah, we'll go look at it. Then they display a car and then the process
If you're lucky,
goes.
because a lot of times they don't even go that well.
No, I don't even want to walk inside. There's a million different
I'm just
caveats.
looking. I'll let you know if I need anything.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're engaged, and we teach ways around that as well. But when the customer's engaged with that first question, you're not letting them off that easy. It's not, well, I'm just looking. Okay, understood, sir. I'm with you 100%. Let me ask you a question. When you pulled in, and you just continue the line of questioning, when you pulled into our establishment a little while ago, obviously you pulled in for, you said you were just driving by. I get it, sir, 100%. Everybody's just driving by until they're just pulling in. So when you ingress the establishment, what was the reason today as opposed to any other day? Well, sir, let me explain what I mean. Is this lunch? Are we on a lunch hour here and I've got to optimize for 20 minutes? Because the focus is I want to use your time as effectively as possible. And if you're saying that you got 20 minutes on lunch, well, I'm not going to try to showcase and sell you an automobile today. I want to be respectful of your time and get you what you need as quickly as possible.
Now, these aren't word tracks you're teaching because you said it works for everything. I mean, what if I'm over the phone? What if I'm selling on the phone?
That's why you take our online sales training, is because it begins to develop the idea that what brought you here today, and you're asking the right question. Well, dude, if I'm selling somebody over the phone and it's a cold outreach, well, what brought them here today? It's not what brought you here today as in physically at my facility right here on this Tarvia, what brought you here today. It's what brought you to this conversation today. Sir, the reason I have your lead on a piece of paper in front of me is because at some point you were reaching out about SaaS or you were reaching out about insurance or real estate or whatever the case may be, right? So all I'm trying to do, sir, is just optimize for your time. This phone call's got to happen either way, and I want to get you off it as quickly as possible. So if you can just kind of give me some insight into why we're on the phone today, I'll get you done with this thing as soon as possible.
Now, how long does it take to get that good?
To get this good? So here's what one
because there's people right now going, okay, I'm in. I get a job and training. So the next question in their head is going to be like, yeah, but how long will it take?
So you
said 2 weeks.
2 weeks to learn the material, right? So here's what one must understand.
How long to sound as good as you did?
You may never sound as good as I do. And what you must understand is that doesn't matter. And then you hit the bomb right after what I just said, which is it doesn't matter. I love it. You're fun, bro. My point being, you don't have to sound like Luke Lunkenheimer to sell. You have to understand the fundamental. More importantly, you don't want to sound like Luke Lunkenheimer because you're not Luke Lunkenheimer. That is the bane of the existence of sales training as it is today. And I'm not going to go down the road of six packs and questions in a book and all this stuff because I respect my competitors and they're all very talented people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be fucking millionaires. But the fact of the matter is too many people are in the marketplace thinking they must become their trainer. Well, I got to sound like that, dude, or I'm not going to be that effective. We don't teach word tracks. We don't teach personalities. We don't teach anything that requires you to be something other than Brad Lee or Sidney Odell or Luke Lunkenheimer. We teach you the understanding that you must know the fundamentals of selling. We package them in a way that you only have to remember simple, principle, fundamental things, and then you just say them as yourself.
Now we're talking.
Thank you, sir.
Dude, every time you say Luke Lunkenheimer, I can't help but think, are you related to Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt?
It's John. John Jacob. Yeah.
Jacob's his brother.
Well, Ben, what you got to
John
understand
Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. Are you related to him?
Well, realistically, his name is my name too. And whenever we hit the town, people always get loud and shout, John.
Gee, that's
and we
funny.
keep going.
Hey, but every time you say Luke Lunkenheimer, I'm thinking, dude, that sounds like John Jacob Jingleheimer.
It sounds
Schmidt.
like John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. It sounds like the words of Corey's Apollo resonating in my head back in Cato, New York, a Luke Puke Pumpkin Farmer, and any other goofy goddamn route you can put together with those words.
But Luke Lunkenheimer go perfect together.
100%. So does John Jacob Jingleheimer.
And by the way, you were smart to go at Luke Lunk, because no one knows if Heimer's Himer, Heimer. What is it, by the way?
Heimer. And the reason I'm Luke Lunk is because, everybody thinks it's because I'm big and I'm a big lunk. No, it's Luke Lunk because my last name's Lunkenheimer, man. And it just so happens that I'm a big, handsome son of a bitch. That's just a coincidence.
Well, that would be a hunk. Then you'd be Luke Hunk.
Could be that, too.
Or maybe you're Luke Lunk the Hunk.
Pick your poison.
Is that what your wife calls you?
What's that?
Luke Lunk the Hunk?
No, she calls me baby, and I call her that,
You
too.
got any kids?
Yeah, man. Yep. I got my stepson, Mikey, who's awesome. He's 12 years old, and he's about as cool as a kid can be. And then I got my little replicated Xerox copy of the Luke Lunk, which is Maximus Lucas Lunkenheimer, and he is the next Luke Lunk. I'll tell you that, man. He's a carbon copy of yours truly. He's awesome.
Well, dude, I appreciate you coming in.
Appreciate you having me.
We're going to talk more. We're going to have you back. I'm going to have you in my little sales coaching thing. Did you do it once or no?
So can I take the liberty of a minute and 30 seconds here real quick? Because I want people to understand the dynamic of playing at a higher level, okay? Now, people watching this podcast need to understand that Brad Lee operates at a higher level than I do, fundamentally. He's wealthier, he's got more business acumen based on experience, and he's got more irons in the fire, right?
Well, just so you know, they wouldn't know that.
What's that?
They wouldn't know that.
Well, I know that's
all
why
they
I'm
know
sharing
me
it.
is a wisecracker, interrupting fool with a podcast.
But you're so much more.
A lot of people don't know that I have businesses.
They should know, bro.
I'm
They
not
should
just
know
a
that you're
podcaster.
Nah, dude, you're a prolific, wealthy entrepreneur. You're a good human being. You're a good dad, and we know each other enough from these little interactions that we've had. But the same way that you knew I was the guy that you wanted to talk to and have on this podcast is the same way that I know you're a real badass, good dad, and just all around good human being. It's because that authenticity. That
Well, I shouldn't have interrupted you. Please proceed with what you were saying.
I figured that'd buy me a few minutes. So, no, realistically, though, to the people out there in podcast land, whether you're listening and you don't see my biceps or you're watching and you get to be privileged to that, the fact of the matter is somebody like Brad Lee saw value in me, and I'm not grandstanding or getting grandiose here. He would agree. And he saw somebody that was intense and authentic and a goddamn good closer. And he said, you know what, I'm going to give this guy the time of day. The reason I'm speaking on this is not for self-appreciation. I'm trying to touch the average Joes out there, man, because that's what I am, dude. I grew up a Cato Meridian Blue Devil. There was like 11 of us on our football team. We played both sides of the ball. And regardless of who my alma mater is, when you grow up of a town that's like 1,600 people and going to Auburn, New York, which is like 12,000 people, is going to a metropolis to buy groceries at Wegmans, and you've never seen a car newer than 5 years old, and you've never seen more cash in somebody's hand than $80. Things like this are not real. This is the shit you see on TV, okay? So if you'd have told me at the age of 6, one day you're going to be a millionaire ex-felon, ex-drug addict, turned successful entrepreneur, you'd have successful car dealerships, you'd be the CEO of a tech startup that's developing a rap battle app, shameless plug, and that you had a Lightspeed virtual training system where you were teaching people how to become excellent salespeople off simple tactics that everybody can get wealthy on, I would have laughed at you. You told me that while I was in prison 10 years ago, I would have laughed at you. If you'd have told me that 2.5 years ago, I would have gone, nah, dude, come on. Now you're just playing with me. But today I sit here in this chair that Brandon Novak, Patrick Bet David, and a million other incredible people have been in, and I'm Luke Lunk. And I'm right here because I brought value to you. And it was just by virtue of a conversation. So anybody out there that's questioning whether or not they have the ability to get in a room like this and converse with a guy like you, anybody who's wondering if they can break six figures, let alone become a millionaire, anybody that just wants more out of their life and has that fire burning inside of them, similar to what I preached about earlier in this podcast, you just need to act. You must start somewhere, and there's no better time than now.
And y'all know how to do it. Get a hold of @LukeLunk or go check him out at CNYDrives.com. That's his car group. Or go to Persuade, paidtopersuade.com.
Yeah, buddy.
Dude, appreciate you coming.
Appreciate you, Rose. Great. Thank you.
Folks, as always, till next time, keep it real.